Hi, everybody. This is Madhav Mohan. Today, I'd like to introduce a wonderfully fascinating book, which you can see. It's called A Different Degree, and it's authored by Dr. Hari Kumar. Actually, the book has a very fascinating tagline. It says, A Different Degree Memoirs of an Indo-Soviet Doctor. And the reason this book is so interesting and intriguing is that it gives us an inside view of the experience of a young boy who went to Moscow from a small village in Kerala named Shastamkota and was thrown right into the middle of this huge superpower. Uh, you can't imagine a more different environment than the Soviet Union at that time for this young boy. And what follows in the book is a very beautifully written, heartwarmingly disarming, exquisitely humorous account of how this young boy metamorphosed into a super competent orthopedic surgeon over the course of 8 or 9 years, and his own personal journey of learning Russian and then learning medicine, and along the way, all the trials and tribulations and foibles and fun and frolic and adventures. Uh, it gives a wonderful inside view of life within the Soviet Union. And the best part of this book is that it is not judgmental at all. It's just an experiential retelling of life as it happened in those 8 or 9 years that Dr. Hari Kumar lived in Russia. So, Dr. Hari Kumar is here with us today to share his thoughts and his reasoning. Um, why did he write this book, and what does it have within the covers? And I would begin by asking him the reason that he chose this very interesting title, A Different Degree. Could you tell us a little bit about that, Dr. Hari Kumar?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I chose this topic because the degree that I got from the USSR is a different degree, different to all other degrees, because it was conferred in Russian language and the degree was given in a faraway country. That's the reason I chose the topic as a different degree. It had gone through some evolution because initially it was Moscow Dreams. Then a lot of people vetoed that. I moved on to Behind the Iron Curtain. Again, apparently there are lots of books written about Behind the Iron Curtain, not necessarily Russia. And then one morning when I woke up, I had a eureka moment. I thought this is a different degree to the others, so just call it a different degree. That's how I arrived there.
It certainly is a different degree because the temperature was of an order of magnitude different, and so too was your medical degree, vastly different from what you had experienced before. Uh, you studied at the Friendship University in Moscow, and that is a very famous international university. And you had a whole international cast, so to speak, from amongst your classmates. All your classmates came from different parts of the world. So, why don't we just hear from some of Dr. Hari's friends from across the world and listen to what they have to say? Now, this is a photo of Dr. Lata and Dr. Hari in the 70s.
Hi everyone, this is Dr. Lata from South India speaking. Hari, the cover of your book, A Different Degree, is very eye catching, and I'm looking forward to reading it and reminiscing about some of the best days of our lives at Friendship University in Moscow. In fact, I think everyone will find this book to be a very interesting read. All the best, Hari. Dasvidanya.
This is what Dr. Carlos from La Paz, which, as all of you know, is the capital of Bolivia, and also the highest capital city in the world. Here's Dr. Carlos.
Hola, amigo Hari. I hope you have not spilled any of the naughty secrets of our youth to the world. Congratulations, Hari. Поздравляю, дорогой Hari. I can't wait to read your book. I hope to see you soon.
Dr. Carlos alludes to some naughty stuff that all of you did back then. Would you like to comment on that? Would you like to spill the beans, Dr. Hari?
Madhav, the answer is no. The simple reason being there were so many things that probably would be sufficient to put into another book. So all the juicy bits will be coming out in part 2. So please watch this space.
Sequel.
Yes.
Now, this is a photo of anatomy class, and you can see a very young Dr. Ali in it.
Hello, Hari. This is Dr. Ali, your friend from Bahrain. You have done a great job. I cannot wait to read your book. See you soon. Goodbye.
And here's muscle man Dr. Shirazi in his youth. Dr. Shirazi seems to be a very interesting person, Dr. Hari.
Yes. Shirazi was a good friend of mine. As you can see from the picture, he was a bodybuilder. He was the perfect all-rounder. He was the 100 meters champion of the university, and he was the key dancer in the folk group of the university, which toured all around the Soviet Union and Europe. And besides that, he was a good student and sang beautifully in Hindi because his grandfather was originally from India.
Hi Hari, this is Dr. Rahim Shirazi here in Kampala, Uganda. Hats off to you, man, for the fantastic job. We were all eagerly awaiting for the book. In fact, the whole of Africa is waiting to read A Different Degree.
This is Dr. Matthew Kurian, consultant pediatrician and colleague of Dr. Hari at Doncaster in the United Kingdom.
A Different Degree is an exhilarating and exciting book of a migrant's journey to get a medical degree and to learn about life behind the Iron Curtain. Read it to experience the humor and the thrill of life in the old Soviet Union.
You know, Dr. Hari, it struck me as quite odd that you would go to the USSR to study medicine when there were so many medical colleges in India, and India had built up a solid foundation of medical training and research and indeed education since independence. So, what made you choose to go to the USSR to study medicine?
Madhav, that's a very interesting question. I've been asked this question many times, and I remember once in one of my train journeys, I met an American professor, and he asked me this question. He put it this way: Dr. Hari, of all the places under the sun, why did you choose the USSR? The answer is, I was lucky to get a scholarship from the Soviet government to study medicine in Moscow, in the Friendship University. And I was young and up for a challenge then, and I took it on.
Catch was that you would have to learn Russian. And Russian, I understand, is a very rich language but difficult to learn. And to learn it well enough to study medicine, that seems to be mind boggling. Certainly for a 17-year-old boy. So, how did you manage that? And can you share your experiences of learning this fascinating language?
I would fully agree with you, Madhav, that it is a fascinating, rich language and it was difficult to learn. But hats off to the Department of Russian Language of the university because they had a very well oiled system. You would subconsciously learn Russian. They had little techniques and tricks which helped you do that. The first one was you were given an option to have a Russian as your roommate. I chose that. Secondly, twice a week after classes, in the evenings, we had to go back to the classrooms, listen to tapes. These tapes were mainly about daily life stories, simple stories. And the following day, we would have discussions about those stories. So subconsciously, you're beginning to learn Russian. It is a difficult language, no doubt. And I'll tell you an interesting story about one of my friends from Nigeria. He was clear what he wanted to do after finishing medicine. He wanted to either go to the US or the UK. So from day one, when anatomy lessons started, he started reading books in English, which he brought along with him, and not the Russian textbooks. So the anatomy class was going on, and the teacher asked him, can you show us or tell us about the incisors? Incisors are the front teeth. So he opened his mouth and pointed towards the front teeth and said, these are the incisors. Okay, good. And where are the molars? Molars are the teeth at the back of the jaw. So this time he opened his mouth widely. And before he could point out, the teacher said, oh, stop. See, soon, we'll be moving on to other parts of the body, private parts, apertures in the body. And I strongly believe that you will not be able to point us to the anatomy of that part. And so he encouraged him to start reading in Russian, which he did after that.
To all of you who are watching, this is a classic example of Dr. Hari's wit and humor. And this book is replete with these little vignettes, and so it becomes really wonderful to read. But Dr. Hari, Russian winters are notorious. We have all heard about how cold and frozen the landscape can become. In fact, um, the imperial ambitions of Napoleon and Adolf Hitler came to naught in the Russian winter. And in your book, you say that while it was minus 20 Celsius in Moscow, it was plus 25 Celsius in Kazakhstan. That tells you the depth of the Russian winter and how cold it can be. So, how did you cope? And what were the lowest temperatures that you experienced?
As you rightly said, Russian winters are famous, are notorious. The lowest temperature I experienced while I was at Moscow was minus 42 degrees in the evenings. This happened only once during the time I was there. And I heard elderly people say that this was the temperature when Hitler and Napoleon got into Moscow. For people coming from warm tropical countries, initially the winter can be a problem, adjusting to this much of a cold. But gradually we get used to it. I'll tell you one example. When I went to meet a friend of mine one day in another hostel, the temperature was about minus 10 degrees. That's very cold, at least for me. So I had my fur cap on, which covers the ears, but usually the nose, the front part of the face, the nose is exposed. The wind was blowing in the opposite direction. And I had to walk about 400 meters to get to the door of this hostel. And I felt that the nose is becoming painful and stinging. But I carried on faster. Luckily, an old lady who was coming in the opposite direction, looked at me and over the wind shouted, "Son, look after your nose, it might drop off." It was beginning to get frostbite. So I just cupped my nose and ran to the entrance of the hostel, went straight to the washroom and looked at the mirror. I could not believe it. My nose was pale as death. I had to slowly rub it and wash it with warm water. And then gradually the color of life came back and the color was the same as the rest of my face. So this is a real story.
Narrow escape. The old lady saved your nose after all.
Correct.
After your first year in Moscow, I guess nostalgia and homesickness must have overtaken you because you then take readers back to your experiences of growing up in India. What made you do that? And could you share something about your own childhood in India?
Correct, Madhav. After the first year, we had a few days free and we were in the hostel and I felt a bit homesick. I was missing my family, my brothers, my loving parents, and my thoughts took me back to India. Up to the age of 5, we lived in Delhi. And then after that, we moved to the south, to our village in Shasamkota in Kerala. Because there were no good English schools in the village, my brother and I were put up in the school boarding in the nearby town of Koilon in a good school called Infant Jesus School. I describe a few escapades of ours. The first one was when my brother, who was fed up and felt homesick, decided to run away, and I joined him. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, we were caught and taken back to the boarding. My brother was kicked out of the boarding. And then I moved a few boardings and described my little adventures in these places in the first part of the book.
You can see that the spirit of adventure was very strongly visible even from childhood. And that probably explains on the third day after you got into the hostel uh, at the Friendship University, you sneaked out of quarantine by opening a window, jumping out, and going on on a tour of Moscow with one of your senior friends, Thomas, as you describe it in the book. So the spirit of adventure, I guess, is still part of your life.
Correct. I think it's more of a survival instinct.
That's right. That's right. But medicine is no doubt a very tough uh, specialty. You had a whole series of subjects, highly complex, intertwining between areas, techniques, tools, concepts, etc. So it takes a lot to become a doctor. Could you share some of your interesting experiences while studying medicine, particularly in Moscow?
Okay, Madhav, I'll go on to that. You're right. Medicine is a tricky specialty. There's a lot to learn. Too many bones in the body, too many muscles, and too many nerves. So we have to know all of them by heart. Now, a couple of instances come back to my mind. The first one was one of my close friends, Dr. Kimaro. He was from Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. He suffered from high blood pressure, which was difficult to control, and he was admitted to a city hospital. I went to visit him, and he introduced me to the patient in the next bed. He was an elderly gentleman, a war veteran called Ivan. He was a very funny character, and he had lots of interesting anecdotes to tell. The next time both Kimaro and I met, Ivan was in the anatomy department of the hospital, and we got the shock of our lives. You can read the details in the book. The second incident that comes to mind is the ENT professor we had. He was a very strict man and nobody had ever seen him laugh. There was only one incident, so his colleagues tell me even that they saw him laugh, and I described that episode in the book as well. The professor of ophthalmology had invented an operation for dry eyes. Dry eyes can be a very difficult problem. So what he did was he transferred the salivary duct, that is the duct that brings spittle into the mouth. He transposed that into the eye. And he told us that the first operation was very successful, but unfortunately, the young man who was subject to this operation lost his girlfriend because of tears. So if you want to know the details, it is there, and it's an interesting incident. There are many more, so I won't go into more of those. You can read the book and find out.
Yes, and I'd strongly recommend everybody to read the book. In fact, there is a fascinating story of how Dr. Hari used to work at Radio Moscow as a newsreader in Malayalam, and how he met the very famous Yuri Levitan, and a couple of nice leadership lessons are added on in that chapter, in which he says how everybody, especially leaders, should be uh, very careful about how they pull rank. Uh, we got a fair idea about your book. Now let's hear what somebody who knows a lot about Russia has to say, and that's Professor Stephen Lovell, who is a professor of modern history at King's College London and an authority on the USSR and Russia. He has written countless books on the USSR. Let's listen to what Professor Lovell has to say after reading A Different Degree.
I very much enjoyed Hari Kumar's memoirs of his experiences as a medical student in the USSR in the 1970s. Here we have a fascinating cross-cultural encounter, the story of an intelligent, curious and ambitious young Indian transplanted from a village in Kerala to the People's Friendship University in Moscow. The book's very informative, but it's also amusing and touching in many places. There are any number of memorable episodes. Dr. Kumar makes eventful trips to the Black Sea, Moldavia, Georgia, Azerbaijan. He tells the hair-raising story of a fellow student administering an ill-advised dose of penicillin. He himself has hair-raising lessons in karate and ice skating. He recounts the moving episode of a student recognising a man he's known as a convivial fellow patient on a hospital ward as a cadaver in anatomy class. And generally there are loads of impromptu meetings, spontaneous dinner invitations, new friendships. You really sense in this book that Dr. Kumar is good at getting the best out of people. He notices and values kindness in others and shows plenty of kindness himself. In this book you learn more from well-observed everyday interactions than from general reflections on Soviet history or socialism. In general terms, I think the book is valuable for getting us away from Cold War stereotypes and showing how the Soviet Union made sense to contemporaries, how people could be aware of the everyday failings of the system and the hollowness of Marxist-Leninist rhetoric, yet at the same time be patriotic and accepting, even proud, of the Soviet social model. This was especially true if, like Dr. Kumar, you were a young person arriving in the socialist metropolis to study at an elite institution with plenty to look forward to in life. The book also reminds us how the Soviet Union could plausibly present itself as a beacon of internationalism and a supposedly non-racist alternative to the West, especially to the students from the 85 or so countries that were represented at the People's Friendship University. Like any good memoir, this book makes us think about perspective and how it changes over time. Dr. Kumar wisely does not seek to settle the question of the relative merits of Soviet socialism and the version of capitalism that has established itself in post-Soviet Russia. but he shows vividly why the post-Soviet phenomenon of nostalgia for the Soviet Union has proved so enduring.
Dr. Hari, after you completed your medical education, you returned to India, uh, started working, and began to raise a family. Let's hear what that little girl standing in the photograph has to say. Well, she's no longer little. She's a highly respected consultant, neuro rehab physician at Charing Cross Hospital in London. Here she is, Dr. Meenakshi.
Hi everyone, this is Meenakshi, Dr. Hari Kumar's daughter. I was so lucky growing up. My dad is an incredible storyteller and he has so much humour, he can make a whole room just burst out laughing. And this is exactly what he's done in his book. It is funny, it's exciting, he really brings his time in Russia to life. More than that though, what I really liked about the book was the way he talks about our homeland, in particular, the village of Shastangota. It makes me so proud to come from such a loving family and a beautiful place. I hope you enjoy reading this book as much as my dad has writing it and as much as I've enjoyed reading it. Congratulations, Achin. I'm so proud of you. Best of luck.
And after so many years, Dr. Hari, you and your friends returned to Moscow. In fact, after 35 years. How did you guys manage to organize this reunion? Especially because all of you were spread and scattered all over the globe. How did you do it?
Well, that's an interesting question, Madhav, because we had lost touch. Many of us did not keep in touch. Fortunately, one of my classmates, Professor Dmitry Kicher, joined as a lecturer in public health in the Friendship University. He rose up the ranks and became a professor. He was a social person and he used to keep in touch with different people from Carlos in Bolivia and other colleagues from different parts of the world. And Professor Kicher, he put us in touch with all the others, and he is the one who was instrumental in pulling us all back together to Moscow and organizing this amazing reunion after 35 years.
So it's only right that we hear Professor Kichas and see what he has to say.
Алло, Хари, привет. Это профессор общественного здравоохранения Кича, твой друг. Представь себе, сколько лет мы проучились в Университете дружбы народов, сколько дней мы провели вместе. И вот ты все это вспомнил. Ты вспомнил, что нам дал Университет дружбы народов, что дал Советский Союз. И потом, когда мы встретились уже в современной России, в современном Российском университете дружбы народов. Спасибо тебе большое. Пусть мир почитает, пусть студенты узнают, чем мы жили, чего мы хотели, что мы достигли. Удачи тебе, удачи твоей книге. Привет большой всему миру. Профессор Кича.
Since all of you went back to Moscow after 3.5 decades, how did Moscow change? What struck you most when you returned?
Moscow was a totally different city from the time we were there. It was a concrete jungle like any other Western capital. The pace of life was different. It was very fast. They had big shopping malls. Everything was available, fast cars, millionaires, and poverty. Poverty was something that we never saw in the Soviet Union. In the book, I show a picture of a beggar in the Red Square. So a lot of big people became very poor, and the social benefits they were getting, like pension and all, were cut down drastically. So a few people became very rich, but the majority were poor. So everything was available in the shops. Anything you say was available in the shops. But people did not have the money to buy it. So that is how the Soviet Union and Moscow changed after it became Russia.
And so it's quite logical to raise the obvious, crucial question: was life better for the common man during the communist socialist days? Or has capitalism been better for people in Russia?
It's a complex and very tricky question. I did a lot of research on this. I asked all my friends, both doctors and non-medicals, about this and tried to arrive at a conclusion. Since it's a complex, tricky question, I don't want to give a straight answer. But if you read my book, A Different Degree, you will find the answer there.
When you all got together for the reunion, how did you celebrate?
It was amazing. The reunion took us back into our youth. We walked the corridors of our university, walked the streets of Moscow where we used to hang out. We even went and said hello to Comrade Lenin in his mausoleum. And we went around to all the places, even met some of our old colleagues who were still working in the university. So those 7 days were probably one of the 7 best days in our lives. The date of the reunion, that is.
And after 7 days, when it was time to leave and go back to your lives, how did it feel?
Sad, very sad. But all good things have to come to an end. We were very happy that we managed to get together after so many years. And we took a vow that we should meet up again, not in heaven, but before that. And we were planning to meet up last year, but unfortunately, the pandemic, COVID set in, and our plans did not materialize. But we'll certainly meet up again.
And as they say, hope springs eternal in the human heart. And hopefully, we'll all get over this nightmare that we're all living through and begin to get back together physically, see each other. And hopefully, Dr. Hari, you and your friends will get back to Moscow sometime in the near future.
We certainly will, Madhav. As I say in my book, Moscow is like a magnet. It tends to attract people back. It might be the warmth of the people, the honesty of the common people, and the sincerity that tends to pull people who understand them back to Moscow. So we will certainly be going back to Moscow to visit friends again.
You know, Dr. Hari transports all of us into a very warm past, albeit in the midst of the frozen Russian winter. I strongly recommend this wonderful book to everybody. Thank you.